Some things I'm going to talk about tonight. Lou Balick and I are doing this presentation. We're to go over installation and configuration. That's my portion of it. And Lou's going to talk a little bit about monitoring and alerting. Now, what is PfSense? PfSense is a free open source BSD-based firewall router. It's pretty full feature. There's a lot of things that are in that you'd see in firewall, full-blown commercial-grade firewalls. And it's got a GUI interface. It's very easy to use. You're going to find that it's very that you won't even have to do the installation and configuration, upfront configuration. A lot of things are going to be done for you when you get to CCDC. All the interfaces will be defined, but there will be some things you're going to want to do pretty much right away. We're to cover some of those. So as far as installation goes, you want to test this out yourself. It's a really good thing and very easy to try in VMware. The way you do it is download the ISO image from pfsense.org. And the way I did it is I created 3 interfaces, internal, external, and DMZ, and a 256 meg of RAM, 10 gig of hard drive, 1 CPU for the device. Now, when you boot PfSense, it's pretty simple. You want to boot into the default. You don't have to worry about the other weird stuff that's out there. So just press 1 and then or let the timer elapse. And the next prompt, you want to press I. Then it's going to go through and present you with a bunch of settings with defaults, accept all the defaults. And you want to do a quick, easy install, click OK, choose symmetric multiprocessor, and then click exit when it's done. When it boots up again, it's going to ask if you want to define VLANs. You want to say no. That's for more complex environments than the ones you'll have at CCDC. And you're going to set WAN to EM2, LAN to EM1, and optional to EM0. And you should see the main CLI up here now. Now, from this main CLI, this is where you can assign interfaces and also set your web configurator, password, and enable secure shell if you want to. Reboot the system, ping hosts, whatever, all sorts of generic stuff. Also going to bring up a generic Linux shell from here. So we're going to go through and finish. You click 2. That's the way you define your various IP addresses for your various interfaces. You've got 3. The last thing you want to do is you want to set up HTTP as the web configurator protocol, and it'll create a filter entry so that you'll be able to access the LAN interface, just by typing in HTTP 172.16.67.200 in this case at a browser. So once that's done, last thing we're going to do is we're going to define a opt1 interface. The opt1 is going to be your DMZ, and this will all be defined at CCDC. And so once you define the opt1 interface, or once it's done it for you, what you want to do when you get there is you'll be logging in with admin and PfSense. That's the default username and password. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some basics, some administration that you want to do, some rule basics, and then we'll talk a little bit about the floating versus interface specific rules. So administration, one of the things that I think is pretty important to do, and it's actually something that's required by a lot of compliance standards out there, is you want to change the standard passwords, username and passwords out there. Disable the username if you can, and in this case, disable the admin user. And you're also going to want to create users for the system with non-standard usernames, something unique and weird, with complex passwords that are difficult to guess. You want to do this so that you protect the access to the system. Now, there's some rule basics in firewalls that you should be aware of. One of the rules basics in almost every firewall system out there is they work in a top-down system so that the first match wins. What do I mean by that? If you've got a rule number 1 in your system that says block all outbound SSH traffic, and the next rule says, oh, but I'm going to allow SSH traffic from 10.1.1.1. What has already happened is any SSH traffic has already been blocked, and so the rule number 2 will never execute because rule number 1 negates it. So you want to be if you want to allow only 10111 to go outbound with a SSH, you put that in the rule base first, and then the drop all after it. The way that PfSense works, and some other firewalls as well, is it's going to control the entry into the firewall. That's where the firewall rules take place as they come into the firewall. And then after a packet is blocked, or if it's passed on, when it's passed on, it'll hit the routing engine of PfSense and get routed out the appropriate interface on its merry way. Um, so you don't need exit rules from the firewall, but you definitely need rules controlling the entry into a particular interface. Now, all interfaces have an implicit deny as a bottom rule that's not shown. What does this mean? It means that if you go through the entire rule base on an interface and there's no rules left, the firewall is going to drop that packet. It's not going to pass it on. One more thing that's important to realize with PfSense is the WAN is the default gateway for rules. What this means is that if the firewall doesn't know how to route a packet, it's going to ship that packet out the WAN gateway. If you want to override this, and you won't need to do it for the CCDC, but let's say you had a network where you had other interfaces that were not out the WAN interface that you wanted to route to, but also were not directly attached to the firewall. What you want to do for those is you want to actually go into systems routing and actually define routes to those particular networks. Again, this will not be necessary for the CCDC. Now, there's two kinds of rules out there. There's floating rules and interface-specific rules. Floating rules are optional and usually not necessary. They won't be for the CCDC. I just want to tell you a little bit about them and what they are. These are rules that are processed before any interface rules or before the routing engine takes the packet. And they're not tied to any particular interface. They work on any interface. And where you would use those is you're going to do traffic shaping or other services, value add services you might throw onto the router, firewall, and PfSense that you might be a snap-in applicant plugin that you'd throw on. Let me talk briefly about traffic shaping and what it is. Traffic shaping enables you to give priority to certain kinds of traffic over other kinds of traffic. And a good real-world example of this is that you might, in a corporation or even universities, give priority traffic to voice over IP, which is really very latency sensitive. And you give priority to that, number one. And one of the things you might you decide you care a lot less about if you're a administrator of the network is people streaming media or chat interfaces, things like that. That kind of traffic can wait. You don't really and just go when there's available bandwidth for it. But you might commit a certain amount of bandwidth for the voice over IP that'll take priority over everything else. That would be handled in a floating rule in PfSense. Now, interface-specific rules will often have specific items tied to them that come up by default. The opt1 interface, or DMZ, that's not going to have any default rules. The WAN interface is going to have two default rules out there. One is going to drop incoming RFC 1918 rules. And for those of you who don't remember what RFC 1918 is off the top of your head, RFC 1918 is the any IP address that begins with a 10 or any IP addresses between 172.16 and 172.31 or 192.168 anything. Those are RFC 1918 addresses. They're considered private address space that you can use in your internal network. And none of those will get routed on the internet. And so since PfSense is designed to be a firewall on the internet, it's going to drop any incoming traffic from the WAN that it sees with those. Bogan IPs, those are ones for high numbered ports or high numbered IP ranges that have not yet been assigned, according to the IANA people out there. So it's going to disable those because those shouldn't be real anyway. The LAN IP interface is going to have some.
I was going to say, make a side note on that. For the CCD, you do not want to check those two boxes.
Yeah, for CCDC, you don't want to drop RFC 1918 addresses or bogan IPs. Those will be used. Now, the LAN is going to have a couple of rules out there as well. One is going to have something that allows any traffic to the LAN interface of at port 80. So what this does, this is called the this is kind of a protection rule to keep you from shooting yourselves in the foot. This will allow any IP address to get to the firewall, and then the person will be able to log in at the firewall. You might want to change this going forward to only allow certain IPs to reach the firewall for administrative reasons. Another thing you might want to you'll have as a default rule is the LAN will be allow to go anywhere it wants. Now you may want to restrict this once you know what outbound ports are necessary, but chances are you'll end up not doing much with that rule. You'll accept that as is. And as I said, your DMZ is not going to have any rules. Now, as far as sample WAN rules go, there's some rules you're going to want to have. You're going to want to allow the inbound scoring engine itself. That'll be a specific IP address, and you're going to want to allow it to go to certain services. Some of those services might be HTTP, HTTPS, SMTP, and DNS. The CCDC engine will require at least those, possibly more, and you'll get a list of what services are necessary to have in place before as part of your packet. Failing to allow those services inbound will cause you to lose points. Now, the LAN rules, there's actually a couple of those that are kind of interesting too. You want to allow outbound for sure, that's already there and it's built. But one of the things you might want to put out there as well is to deny all hosts except for a couple to manage your DMZ hosts. Why might you want to do this? You might want to deny your internal host from getting to your DMZ to change things on those hosts except for authorized hosts. Particular workstations. And this is done in a lot of organizations where you don't want someone to go to a database server except for the DBAs. A lot of times that's controlled by usernames. In the CCDC, we'll just control that by limiting it to a couple of machines. And you'll be able to do that. As far as the DMZ, that's going to be remarkably simple. You're going to allow outbound connections from it and really nothing else. Now, I'm going to do a quick demo of, take you through the interface a little bit. One of the things I want to do is show how you go about disabling the admin user and how you go about creating new users, how you'd go about adding a rule to the WAN to allow inbound SMTP or other traffic, and how you add a rule to the LAN to block access to the DMZ for all users except a particular IP. So let's go take a look at here is the PfSense GUI. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the user manager, and you can see I've already created a user called Bubba, but I'm going to create a new one, and I'm just going to call this one. Let's call him Blue, and the password is going to be very complex. And Blue's going to have access. He's going to be a member of the admins group. It's the only group I have in there right now, but I could create other ones if I wanted to. And then I'm just going to click Save. So now there's a group out there, or a user out there called Blue. Now, one of the things I could do at this point is I could disable the admin password. What will happen then is that the admin password won't be able to log in again. I'm not actually going to do that, but that's how you go about doing it. And that would be a really good idea to do for the CCDC, because then that user will not be able to get on and use with the default password, even or default username, even if you change the password for that user. It's probably a pretty good idea because that'll slow down the password guessing people who might be attacking your network. Hint: there will be some of those. Um, Now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about rules, and I'm going to start with the WAN rules. Um, we're to probably want to take out these RFC 1918 networks rules first. Um, and then we're also going to want to go in, as I mentioned, I want to make sure that I allow inbound port 80, 25, and 53. Note in port 53, that's DNS, I want to allow both TCP and UDP because DNS goes over both those ports. For simple inquiries, DNS will use just port 53 over UDP, but if it gets a long answer, it's actually going to switch to TCP to get that connection in. So the way that you would add a new one if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to copy one of these, you just go like this, and let's say you wanted to add in HTTPS or SSL traffic. The way you do that is just go all the way up here to HTTPS and select that, and now anything coming in to the WAN interface destined for your DMZ is going to be able to actually go over port 443 HTTPS is going to be able to get in. And so I click save, and you can see that rule's there. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how you might prohibit a use or allow one user only to get to opt1 from inside your network. And that would be done this way. You say first, I'm going to create a rule that allows that IP address I want to, in this case 172.16.67.103, to be able to get to OptNet for any service. But then right below that, I'm going to put one out there and say, if it's not that, I'm going to block that. You can see this one's a block out there. If you choose for testing reasons, you want to disable a rule, like let's say this is causing problems, I could always just edit the rule. And to edit, all you have to do is double click on it, and I can disable the rule, and that'll disable it without removing it from the list. Okay, so those are some rule basics on how to do this, and at this point,
all right, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the menu options in PfSense. So we're going to go ahead and log in. By default, it's Administrator and PfSense. So here you can see this is my firewall I've been trying for the last couple of months. So I want to go through a couple quick options here and how to navigate and use this. So you can see by default takes you to the system dashboard. So you can go here and click add, and you can add new options. So if you want to see how many packets you sent, receive, or packages you have installed, firewall logs, you can set this all up. So a couple key things I want to show in here. One is the system. Under system, you can go ahead and install additional packages. So here's some of the packages I have in by default. I have an AV package. So what that means is it'll scan all the packets coming in and out of my network. I'll have PF blocker, which is additional IP address blocking system. You can subscribe to different lists, block different countries. I'll go through those in a moment. It also has a built-in snort, so if you have a snort account, you could put the key in there and have that working for you too. And then there's another option called system patches. I don't really know a lot about system patches, but from my understanding is you can use it to download additional patches for other machines. So that'd be kind of nice. For example, on the CCD, instead of having all the machines going out for updates, you can just get this guy to get the updates. So not 100% sure on that, but that's from what I came across. I found a lot of information. And by default for the CCD, the only tool that's going to be in here is the OpenVM tool, because these are running as a VM, so they'll have to be there installed. So these are some options I would recommend you to go ahead and install. It's really easy. You just go to package, you scroll down, you can see there's tons of different ones. So there's backup systems, so You can do country block. You can set up this as also a DNS server. It has open VPN. So it has a lot of very cool features you can do in here. I'm not going to bore you to death by going through all those. You can check that out yourself. You have your different interfaces. You have your WAN interface. So you can put in here. You have your LAN. So you can set up your LAN information. Your static IP address that your management side is on. You can also have more than 2 interfaces. You would just have, what stops you is the amount of interfaces you have physically on your PC. You have your firewall. So here's some of the different plugins. So like you can see, like I have the PF blocker. So here you can see I have the generic information here. I got where I click and enabled, and it's also enable logging. So you have your inbound interface, your outbound interface, what you're going to do, and then you have your different tabs. You can subscribe to your own custom list, make your own custom list, or use these address blocks that are available for you. All right. So some of the other services you also have, here you can see I have the antivirus. I have really played a lot with it. But you can see here, this had blocked a couple different viruses that came into my machine. So that's kind of cool. So it stopped them from being downloaded to one of my boxes. Pretty cool. And you can set this up. I have this up as in transparent mode. And then you have your different settings. So mine's set up to update every 24 hours. All right. And then you can also set up a DHCP server, DNS4. You have a bunch of different settings. So here we have Snort. So you can see I have Snort set up. So you can see here's some different alerts I have on my box. And blocked, whitelist, you can suppress different things. And then on your status, this is where you have some good information coming in too. You have your system logs, so you can see what's going on with your box. So you can see right now I'm having a little problem with my PF blocker. So now I have to look into that and see what's going on with that. And let's see what else. I already showed you the dashboard. You have your interfaces. You have like an Xbox, any other type of device if you want to set up the UPnP or NAT for it. You can go right in there and set that up. So like I have my Xbox and all that set up using that service. So those are the main things I just wanted to kind of show you a quick breakdown and some of the things I would recommend being familiar with for the competition. At least knowing how to set up the AV, that probably wouldn't hurt. Setting up Snort, probably also setting up Squid, which is a proxy server. So those would be some good modules I would practice installing. And like I said again, it doesn't take long to set up. And I will be making a tutorial on demonstrating the whole installation process in the near future. So thank you very much. See you in February. Thanks.